I am Simone Washington, 30 years old, and I thought I had just married my soulmate. I inherited a $75 million corporation from my grandmother, but I kept it hidden, pretending to be a simple community organizer to find someone who truly loved me for who I was. Thank God I protected that secret, because the morning after our wedding, my new mother-in-law, Gloria, walked into my kitchen. She smiled sweetly, slid a stack of legal documents across the counter, and said, "Now that you're family, sign over that little inheritance your grandmother left you. Darius needs it for his business ventures." I signed exactly what she asked for. What she didn't realize was that her greed had just activated the inheritance protection clause my grandmother built into her will, and by attempting to steal $750,000, she had just triggered a comprehensive legal investigation into her entire family's criminal history. Before I dive into this story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever discovered that the people hugging you were the same ones stabbing you in the back. The morning sunlight poured through the windows of our beautiful new townhouse in Baltimore. I stood in the kitchen, smiling as I inhaled the aroma of fresh brewed coffee. This was supposed to be the beginning of my forever. My husband Darius was still sleeping upstairs after our incredible wedding night. I had never felt more complete. I was so absorbed in the peaceful moment that I nearly jumped out of my skin when the back door suddenly opened. My new mother-in-law, Gloria, stood in the doorway. She wasn't wearing her elegant wedding attire anymore, but a crisp business suit that screamed power and intimidation. Behind her was Darius's sister, Vanessa, a corporate attorney who looked like she'd just stepped out of a hostile takeover negotiation. Her designer heels clicked sharply against my hardwood floors. "Simone, good morning," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "You're both here so early. Darius is still asleep." Gloria brushed past me without a second glance and positioned herself at the head of my kitchen island like she owned the place. Her expression was ice cold. "I'm not here for pleasantries," she stated flatly. "Sit down. We need to handle some business." Vanessa remained standing, her eyes scanning my kitchen with barely concealed contempt. "You look comfortable here," she said with a smirk. "Don't get too settled." She then dropped a thick manila folder onto the granite countertop in front of me with an audible thud. "Read it carefully." My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the documents. "What is this?" I asked, confusion washing over me. "I don't understand what's happening." "It's a standard asset transfer agreement," Gloria said impatiently, waving her hand dismissively. "Darius told us all about that small trust fund your grandmother set up for you. Very sweet. But you're part of this family now, Simone. And in this family, we don't operate with financial secrets. Your money is Darius's money. He needs to manage it appropriately for both of your futures." I flipped through the pages, my eyes struggling to make sense of the legal terminology. Asset consolidation, fiduciary authority, complete transfer of control. I looked up, my voice barely audible. "This looks like you want me to give Darius complete control of my inheritance." Vanessa actually laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "We're not asking, sweetheart. We're instructing. This is standard procedure for all marriages in our family. Now sign the documents so we can move forward." My heart pounded against my chest. I stared at the cover page that simply read Washington Family Asset Management Agreement. I turned to the second page, then the third. The language was deliberately complex, designed to confuse. "What exactly is this?" I asked again, my voice trembling. "I really need to understand what I'm signing." Gloria sighed heavily, as if explaining basic arithmetic to a stubborn child. "It's a legal document, Simone," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Darius informed us about that little trust fund your grandmother established for you. It's adorable, really. A nice starting point for your marriage. But you're married now. You're a Washington. And in this family, we consolidate all assets for maximum efficiency. Your inheritance now belongs to Darius for proper financial management." I scanned the document again, and suddenly my blood turned to ice. My eyes caught a specific phrase: "Complete transfer of fiduciary control of the Harriet Washington Memorial Trust." "This is a complete transfer," I said, the words sticking in my throat. "You want me to surrender total control of my entire trust fund?" Vanessa scoffed, tapping her perfectly manicured fingernail against the counter. Stop being so melodramatic. It's just a formality. He's your husband now. He needs access to your financial resources to plan for your shared future. You don't want to start your marriage being difficult, do you? Think about how that reflects on you. I stared at the empty signature line waiting for my name. Something felt fundamentally wrong about this. My grandmother, I began carefully. She set this up very specifically for me. It's complicated. There are protections built in. Gloria leaned forward, her smile vanishing completely. What's complicated about marriage? You commit your life to him. That includes your finances. Or were you planning on hiding money from your husband? From his family? Is that the kind of wife you intend to be, Simone? Secretive and selfish? No, that's not what I mean, I said, feeling cornered and defensive. It's just I wasn't expecting this. Not the morning after our wedding. Vanessa sighed dramatically, checking her expensive watch. Look, she said, my name sounding like an insult in her mouth. We have appointments, important business meetings. Darius has significant financial obligations. Your little fund can help secure the down payment on a lucrative investment property we've been eyeing. It's time for you to contribute to this family's success. Just sign the papers. It's incredibly simple. Just sign it, Simone. Vanessa's voice was razor sharp, slicing through the morning calm. She pushed a gold pen across the island toward me. It's not rocket science. I stared at that pen. The gleam of its clip suddenly triggered a powerful memory, transporting me back to my grandmother's elegant study. The memory hit me with overwhelming force. I was 22 again, sitting in her luxurious leather chair, surrounded by the scent of old books and her signature jasmine perfume. Harriet Washington, my grandmother, sat across from me at her antique mahogany desk. She pushed a thick leather portfolio toward me with deliberate ceremony. This is it, Simone, baby. $75 million. She said it so calmly, like discussing the weather. And a target painted on your back for the rest of your natural life. I had gasped. Grandma, I can't. I don't know how to. She raised her hand, her eyes filled with love but also fierce seriousness. You can and you will, baby girl. But you must be strategic. They will come for it. Men, friends, even blood family. They will smile in your face, tell you they love you, and the entire time they'll be scheming to get their hands on this fortune. They will love your money, Simone, never you. Trust me on this. I remember my fear, raw and paralyzing. How will I know who to trust, Grandma? You won't, she said simply. Not immediately. That's why I built you a fortress. This trust is your fortress, and every fortress needs a trapdoor for unwanted intruders. She smiled then, a slow, clever, knowing smile that I would remember forever. Let's call it the Inheritance Protection Clause. If anyone ever tries to manipulate you, coerce you, or worse, marries you specifically to access this money, their act of greed will be their complete destruction. This document will protect you long after I'm gone, baby. My eyes snapped back to the present moment. The kitchen suddenly felt colder, more hostile. Gloria was tapping her foot impatiently, her irritation obvious. Are you deaf, child? Sign the damn paper already. My hand was suddenly perfectly steady. The fear evaporated, replaced by cold, crystalline clarity. I looked down at the document Vanessa had so arrogantly prepared. My eyes scanned the text with new understanding. All assets, funds, and properties held within the Harriet Washington Memorial Trust. Estimated value, $750,000. $750,000. I almost laughed out loud. They had orchestrated this entire elaborate, cruel scheme for $750,000. Darius must have snooped through my personal papers at some point. He must have found some old bank statement, some decoy account my grandmother had strategically created, and reported back to his greedy, scheming family with incomplete information. They built this entire relationship, this entire marriage, on a tiny fraction of the truth. They hadn't even gotten the full picture. The Harriet Washington Memorial Trust was just the small holding account, a deliberate decoy. The Montgomery Legacy Corporation, the $75 million parent company, wasn't mentioned anywhere in their fraudulent document. They had absolutely no idea what they were really dealing with. They thought they were robbing a convenience store when they were actually attempting to rob Fort Knox. And they had just walked directly into the trap my brilliant grandmother had so carefully constructed for exactly this moment. The sound of footsteps descending the stairs made my head snap up instantly. Darius. He was finally awake. He walked into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his expensive silk robe hanging loosely around him. He looked tense, his smile forced and tight as he noticed his mother and sister standing in our kitchen. "Darius, thank God," I said, flooding my voice with relief. I stood up quickly, moving toward him. "Baby, tell them this is insane." I grabbed his arm, searching his face for the man I had married just yesterday. The man who had cried genuine tears during his wedding vows. The man who had whispered that I was his everything. "Tell them we don't do business like this," I continued, my voice pleading. "Tell them this isn't how we're going to start our marriage." He looked at me, really looked at me, and in that single moment, I saw it, the truth. His eyes weren't warm or loving or supportive. They were cold, calculating, impatient. "Simone," he said quietly, pulling his arm away from my grip. "Just sign the documents. It's not a big deal. My family knows what they're doing. They've been managing money successfully for years. You need to trust us on this." I stood there, frozen, as my entire world collapsed around me. "Trust you?" I whispered. "Darius, this is my grandmother's legacy. You want me to just hand it over without even discussing it with me first?" "We're discussing it now," Gloria interjected sharply. "And frankly, we're running out of patience. This is how this family operates. You're either with us or you're against us." Vanessa crossed her arms, her expression smug. "You knew what you were getting into when you married into this family, Simone. We're successful because we make smart financial decisions together. This is a smart decision." I looked at Darius again, desperately searching for any sign of the man I thought I loved. "Did you know about this?" I asked him directly. "Did you know they were coming here this morning with these papers?" He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable for approximately 3 seconds. "I mentioned it to them, yes. They're my family, Simone. I trust them. You should trust them too. Plus, it's your money. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine, right? That's what marriage means." "No," I said firmly, surprising myself with the strength in my voice. "That's not what marriage means. Marriage means partnership, communication, respect. This," I gestured to the documents, "is manipulation." Gloria stood up, her face hardening into pure anger. "Watch your tone, young lady. You're speaking to your husband's mother. We have been nothing but welcoming to you. We included you in our family, and this is how you repay our generosity? With disrespect and suspicion?" I felt the walls closing in around me. 3 people who were supposed to love me, standing in my kitchen, demanding I surrender everything my grandmother had worked her entire life to build and protect. I thought about my grandmother's words. Their act of greed will be their complete destruction. I picked up the gold pen. All 3 of them visibly relaxed, triumphant smiles spreading across their faces. They thought they'd won. They thought I was broken. I looked at Darius one final time. "I love you," I said quietly. "I really did love you." His smile faltered slightly, confused by the past tense. "I love you too, baby," he said uncertainly. "That's why this is going to be good for us." I turned to the signature page, the pen hovering over the line, and then I signed it. I signed every page exactly where they indicated. I dated each signature. I initialed every section. Gloria actually clapped her hands together. Finally, some sense. "Welcome to the family, Simone. Truly welcome." Vanessa gathered the documents, sliding them into her briefcase with satisfaction. "Smart choice. We'll file these immediately. The transfer should be completed within 48 hours. They left the same way they came, through the back door, their mission accomplished." Darius kissed my forehead. "See? That wasn't so hard. I'm proud of you, baby. We're going to be so successful together." After he went upstairs to shower, I sat alone in my kitchen. I pulled out my phone and made a single call. "Mr. Harrison? This is Simone Washington. The trap has been triggered. Please proceed with the full protocol." The voice on the other end, my grandmother's longtime attorney, was calm and professional. "Understood, Miss Washington. I'll contact the authorities immediately. The investigation will begin within the hour." I hung up and sat in the silence. My grandmother had taught me that sometimes you have to let people think they've won before you reveal they've actually lost everything. 2 days later, I was sitting in my real office, not the small nonprofit office where I pretended to work for $45,000 a year. My actual office, the corner suite on the 35th floor of the Montgomery Building in downtown Baltimore. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor. My name, Simone Washington, was on the door with the title, President and CEO, Montgomery Legacy Corporation. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my executive assistant, Marcus, buzzed me. "Miss Washington, your attorney Mr. Harrison is here with some visitors. He says it's urgent." "Send them in," I replied, setting down my coffee. The door opened, and Mr. Harrison walked in, followed by 2 federal agents. Behind them, escorted and in handcuffs, were Gloria, Vanessa, and Darius. Their faces were a mixture of shock, fury, and absolute terror. "What is this?" Gloria shrieked. "What is happening? Simone, tell them there's been a mistake." I stood up slowly, smoothing down my designer suit. "There's no mistake, Gloria. Please, everyone, sit down." The agents positioned my former family members in the chairs facing my desk. They looked so small now, so powerless. "Simone," Darius said, his voice breaking. "Baby, what is this? Why are we here?" I walked around my desk, leaning against it, my arms crossed. "Let me ask you a question, Darius. What did you think I did for a living?" He blinked, confused. "You're a community organizer. You work for a nonprofit. You told me I told you what I needed to tell you," I interrupted. "I wanted to meet someone who loved me for me. Not for my money, not for my company, not for my connections. So I created a test." I gestured around my office. "This is Montgomery Legacy Corporation. My grandmother built this company from nothing. When she died 3 years ago, she left it to me. All $75 million of it." The color drained from all 3 of their faces. "$75 million?" Vanessa whispered. "But the trust fund was a decoy," I said calmly. "The Harriet Washington Memorial Trust contains exactly $750,000. A small account my grandmother set up specifically to trap people like you." I walked back behind my desk and pulled up a document on my computer. You see, my grandmother was brilliant. She knew people would come for my money, so she built what she called an inheritance protection clause into her will. If anyone tried to coerce me, manipulate me, or fraudulently obtain access to any portion of my inheritance, it would trigger a full investigation into their background, their finances, and their intentions. Mr. Harrison stepped forward. "When you signed those documents 2 days ago, Miss Washington immediately contacted me. We began a comprehensive investigation into the Washington family. What we found was quite disturbing." Gloria's face turned red. "You can't do this. We're family. You attempted to commit fraud," I said coldly. "You created false legal documents. You attempted to steal $750,000 from me through coercion and manipulation. But that's just the beginning." Mr. Harrison opened a folder. "During our investigation, we discovered that Gloria Washington has been running a real estate fraud scheme for the past 7 years. She's been forging documents to flip properties she doesn't own, defrauding banks out of millions of dollars. Vanessa Washington, as her attorney, has been facilitating these crimes, creating false legal documents and laundering money through shell corporations." "And Darius," I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my best efforts. "Darius has been involved in identity theft, using fake credit applications to open accounts in other people's names. You've destroyed lives, Darius. You've ruined credit scores, bankrupted families, all so you could maintain your expensive lifestyle." Darius was crying now, full tears streaming down his face. "Simone, please. I love you. I really do love you." "No, you don't," I said quietly. "You loved what you thought I had. You loved $750,000. You would have pretended to love me for that. Can you imagine how devastated you would have been to discover you'd wasted all that time for such a small amount? Agent Rodriguez stepped forward. Darius Washington, Gloria Washington, and Vanessa Washington, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, attempted grand larceny, identity theft, real estate fraud, and money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Simone, please, Gloria screamed as they were led away. Please, we're family. Family forgives. Family protects each other. I watched them go without saying a word. When the door closed behind them, I sat down heavily in my chair. Mr. Harrison sat across from me. Are you all right, miss? Washington? I took a deep breath. I thought he loved me. I really thought he did. I'm sorry, Mr. Harrison said gently. But your grandmother was right. The trap worked exactly as designed. You're protected now. What happens next? I asked. They'll be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Gloria and Vanessa are facing 15 to 20 years for their fraud schemes. Darius is facing 10 to 15 years for identity theft and conspiracy. They'll lose everything. I nodded slowly. And the marriage? Already filed for annulment based on fraud. You'll be legally single within 30 days. That night, I stood in my real apartment, not the modest one-bedroom I'd maintained for appearances, but my actual penthouse overlooking the inner harbor. I poured myself a glass of wine and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. Miss Washington? A tentative female voice asked. This is Miss Washington, I replied cautiously. My name is Detective Lisa Chen. I'm calling because we've been investigating identity theft cases for 2 years, and your report about Darius Washington just broke our entire case wide open. Because of you, we've identified 47 victims, families who lost everything because of his schemes. We can finally bring them justice. I felt tears prick my eyes. I'm glad I could help. Ma'am, you did more than help. You gave these families closure. One of them, a single mother named Maria Rodriguez, she's been trying to rebuild her credit for 3 years because of what he did. She wanted me to tell you thank you. After I hung up, I stood there for a long time. My grandmother had protected me, but in doing so, I had also helped protect others. Over the next few months, I threw myself into my work at Montgomery Legacy. I restructured several departments, launched new initiatives, and began to truly understand the empire my grandmother had built. But I also started something new. I established the Harriet Washington Foundation, dedicated to helping victims of financial fraud rebuild their lives. We provided legal assistance, credit repair services, and financial education. Maria Rodriguez was one of our first clients. 6 months after Darius's arrest, I attended the trial. I sat in the back of the courtroom, watching as victim after victim testified about how Darius had destroyed their finances, their credit, their trust. He sat at the defense table, looking small and broken. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand and told my story. I explained the elaborate deception, the wedding, the morning after, the trap. The judge looked at me with something like respect. Miss Washington, your grandmother was a wise woman. Yes, Your Honor, I replied. She was. The verdict came back quickly. Guilty on all counts. Darius was sentenced to 15 years. Gloria got 18 years. Vanessa got 16 years. As they were led away, Darius looked at me one last time. I'm sorry, Simone, he mouthed. I didn't respond. I just walked out of the courtroom and never looked back. A year after the trial, I was genuinely thriving. Montgomery Legacy had its best year ever, with $12 million in profits that we reinvested into community development projects across Baltimore. The Harriet Washington Foundation had helped over 200 families recover from financial fraud. I had rebuilt my life on my own terms, without deception, without pretense. I was finally just Simone. One Saturday afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months, visit a small coffee shop in my old neighborhood. I dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, my hair in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no designer labels, just me. I ordered a latte and found a comfortable corner table with a good book. I was so absorbed in reading that I didn't notice someone approaching until a voice said, "Excuse me, Is this seat taken? I looked up. A handsome man about my age stood there, holding a coffee cup and looking hopeful. He wore glasses, a casual button-down shirt, and had the warmest smile I'd seen in a long time. "No, it's available," I said, gesturing to the empty chair. "Thank you," he said, sitting down. "I'm usually not this forward, but all the other tables are taken, and you looked like you were reading something interesting." I showed him the cover. It's a history of Black-owned businesses in Baltimore. Research for a project I'm working on. His eyes lit up. "That's fascinating. I'm a high school history teacher. Marcus Coleman," he said, extending his hand. "I teach African American history at Douglas High School." "Simone," I said, shaking his hand. I deliberately didn't give my last name. "Nice to meet you." We talked for an hour. He told me about his students, his passion for teaching, his dream of writing a book about unsung Black entrepreneurs in Baltimore's history. I told him about the nonprofit work I was doing, helping families rebuild after financial crises. He never asked about my salary, my car, or where I lived. He just talked about ideas, about history, about making a difference. "You know what's funny?" he said, stirring his coffee. "I grew up poor, really poor, but my grandmother always told me, 'Marcus, money can't buy integrity. Build your character, and the rest will follow.' She cleaned houses her whole life, but she was the richest person I ever knew." I felt my eyes water slightly. "She sounds incredible." "She was," he said softly. "She passed away 3 years ago, but her wisdom guides everything I do." As we talked, I realized I was genuinely smiling, genuinely relaxed, genuinely myself. This man didn't know about Montgomery Legacy. He didn't know about the $75 million. He didn't know about Darius or the trial or any of it. He just knew Simone, a woman in a coffee shop who shared his passion for helping people and understanding history. "I should probably get going," Marcus said eventually, checking his watch. "But this was really nice. Would you maybe want to grab coffee again sometime? Like, intentionally?" I hesitated for just a moment. The old fear crept in. But then I remembered my grandmother's other piece of wisdom. "Baby, don't let one bad apple spoil the whole tree. The right one is out there. You'll know him when you feel it." "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. We exchanged numbers. As he left, he turned back with that warm smile. "It was really great meeting you, Simone." "You too, Marcus," I replied. Over the next few months, Marcus and I became close. We had coffee dates, then dinner dates, then long walks through Baltimore's historic neighborhoods. He continued to have no idea who I really was. And I loved that. With him, I wasn't the CEO. I wasn't the target of anyone's schemes. I was just Simone, a woman who laughed at his terrible jokes, debated history with him, and felt safe. 6 months into our relationship, I knew it was time to tell him the truth. I invited him to my penthouse for dinner. When he arrived and saw the building, his eyes widened. "This is where you live?" he asked, looking up at the luxury high-rise. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, taking his hand. We rode the elevator to the top floor. When I opened the door to my penthouse, he stood in the doorway, stunned. "Simone, I don't understand," he said. "I thought you worked for a nonprofit." "I do," I said. "I run a nonprofit, but I also run a $75 million corporation. My grandmother left it to me. I'm the CEO of Montgomery Legacy Corporation." I watched his face carefully, waiting for the change, waiting for the greed, the calculation, the schemes to start forming. But instead, he just looked confused. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the last man I dated, the man I married, only wanted me for my money. He and his family tried to steal from me. So I've been hiding who I really am to see if you truly cared about me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Simone, I fell in love with the woman who debates history with me at coffee shops, the woman who volunteers at community centers, the woman who makes me laugh until my sides hurt. Whether you have $75 million or $75 doesn't change any of that." I started crying. "You mean that?" "I do," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Though I'll admit, this is the fanciest place I've ever been invited to dinner. Should I have dressed up more?" I laughed through my tears. That night, I told him everything. The full story about Darius, Gloria, Vanessa, the trap, the trial, everything. He listened without judgment, holding my hand the entire time. When I finished, he said, "Your grandmother sounds like she was an incredible woman." She was, I agreed. I wish you could have met her. I think I did, he said, smiling. I'm looking at her granddaughter right now. 2 years later, Marcus and I stood together at the grand opening of the Harriet Washington Community Center, a state-of-the-art facility in West Baltimore providing education, job training, and resources to underserved families. The center was funded entirely by Montgomery Legacy and bore my grandmother's name with pride. Marcus had helped design the curriculum, creating programs that combined practical skills with African American history and entrepreneurship. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of community members, city officials, and families who would benefit from this center. My grandmother, Harriet Washington, built an empire from nothing, I began, my voice steady and strong. She cleaned houses, worked 3 jobs, saved every penny, and invested wisely. By the time she passed away, she had created something extraordinary. But her greatest gift to me wasn't the money. It was her wisdom. She taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in the lives you touch, the families you help, and the legacy you leave behind. She also taught me about protection. She taught me that sometimes the people smiling in your face are the ones holding knives behind their backs. She taught me to be smart, to be strategic, and to never, ever compromise who I am for someone else's greed. I paused, looking at Marcus standing in the front row, his face full of pride and love. But she also taught me that the right people do exist, people who see you for who you are, not what you have, people who love your character more than your bank account. This center represents both lessons. We're protecting our community by providing resources and education, and we're building relationships based on genuine care and support, not exploitation. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, a young woman approached me. She looked nervous but determined. "Miss Washington? My name is Destiny Harris. I was one of the victims in your ex-husband's identity theft case. Because of your foundation, I was able to rebuild my credit and start my own business. I just wanted to say thank you." I hugged her. "You did the hard work, Destiny. We just provided the tools." "No," she insisted. "You provided hope. You showed me that there are still good people in the world, people who use their power to help, not hurt." That evening, Marcus and I sat on the balcony of my penthouse, watching the sunset over Baltimore. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "I'm thinking about how grateful I am," I said. "Grateful for my grandmother. Grateful that her trap worked. Grateful that it led me here, to this moment, with you." Marcus took my hand. "Simone, I have something to ask you." He pulled out a small velvet box. My heart stopped. "I know you've been hurt before. I know you have every reason to be cautious. But I love you. Not your company. Not your money. You. The real you. I'm a high school teacher who will probably never make more than $65,000 a year. I can't offer you expensive things or a fancy lifestyle, but I can offer you honesty, partnership, and a love that's based on who we are, not what we have." He opened the box, revealing a simple, beautiful ring. "Simone Washington, will you marry me?" I looked at this man, this genuine, kind, brilliant man who had fallen in love with me when I was just Simone in a coffee shop. "Yes," I said, tears streaming down my face. "Yes, Marcus, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring on my finger, and we kissed as the sun set over the city. A year later, we had a small, intimate wedding at the Harriet Washington Community Center. No expensive venue, no hundreds of guests. Just close friends, family, and the community members whose lives had been touched by our work. My grandmother's best friend, Mrs. Patterson, officiated. As Marcus and I exchanged vows, I thought about my first wedding to Darius. The expensive venue, the elaborate ceremony, the beautiful lies. This wedding was different. This was real. When Marcus said, "I promise to love you in success and struggle, in wealth and simplicity, for who you are today and who you'll become tomorrow," I knew he meant every word. That night, As we danced at our reception, Marcus whispered in my ear, "You know what the best part of marrying you is?" "What's that?" I asked. "I get to spend the rest of my life learning from the strongest woman I've ever met, and I get to help you build a legacy that would make your grandmother proud." I pulled back to look at him. "You already do that every single day." 5 years after my grandmother's death, Montgomery Legacy Corporation had doubled in size, now worth $150 million. But more importantly, the Harriet Washington Foundation had helped over 2,000 families recover from financial fraud and rebuild their lives. The Harriet Washington Community Center had become a model for similar centers across the country. And Marcus and I had welcomed twin daughters into the world, Harriet and Grace, named after my grandmother and his. One evening, as I rocked Harriet to sleep, I thought about everything my grandmother had taught me. She had protected me with her trap, yes, but she had also prepared me to build something meaningful. The real inheritance wasn't the $75 million. It was the wisdom to know my worth, the courage to protect myself, the strength to rebuild, and the grace to forgive without forgetting. Darius, Gloria, and Vanessa were still in prison. I had received several letters from Darius over the years, apologizing and asking for forgiveness. I never responded. Some bridges, once burned, should stay as ashes. They remind you of where you've been and why you can never go back. But I did visit Gloria once, 3 years into her sentence. She was in the prison's visiting room, looking decades older than her years. "Why did you come?" she asked, her voice hollow. "I came to tell you that I forgive you," I said simply. Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, Simone. Thank you. Does that mean—" "It doesn't mean we're family again," I interrupted gently. "It doesn't mean I trust you. It doesn't mean I'll help you. It just means I'm releasing the anger because holding on to it was poisoning me. But forgiveness isn't reconciliation. It's just freedom for me." I stood to leave, and she called out, "I really am sorry. We destroyed everything because of greed." "Yes," I agreed. "You did. I hope you learn from it." I never visited again. Some lessons can only be learned in isolation. 10 years after my grandmother's death, I stood in my office at Montgomery Legacy, now the largest Black-owned corporation in Maryland. My daughters, now 5 years old, were playing in the corner with blocks, building towers they said would be even bigger than Mommy's building. Marcus walked in with lunch. He'd taken a sabbatical from teaching to write his book about Black entrepreneurs in Baltimore. It was nearly finished and already generating interest from major publishers. "How are my favorite girls?" he asked, kissing me and then kneeling down to hug the twins. "Mommy, is it true that Great-Grandma Harriet was super smart?" Harriet asked. "The smartest," I said, smiling. "She built everything we have from nothing. Will you tell us about her?" Grace asked. I looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. I sat down on the floor with my daughters. "Your great-grandmother taught me the most important lesson of my life," I began. "She taught me that your value doesn't come from what you have. It comes from who you are. She taught me that there will be people in life who pretend to love you but really just want what you have. And she taught me how to protect myself from those people." "How?" Harriet asked, her eyes wide. "By being smart, by being strong, by trusting my instincts, and by never ever being afraid to stand alone, if standing with others means compromising who I am." The twins processed this with the seriousness only 5-year-olds can muster. "Did someone try to steal from you, Mommy?" Grace asked. "Yes, baby," I said honestly. "Someone did. But Great-Grandma Harriet had taught me how to protect myself. And because of her wisdom, not only was I safe, but we were able to help thousands of other families stay safe too." "We want to be smart like Great-Grandma Harriet," Harriet declared. "Then you will be," I promised, "because I'm going to teach you everything she taught me." That night, after putting the girls to bed, Marcus and I sat on our balcony. "You know what I realized today?" I said. "What's that?" "My grandmother's greatest gift wasn't the money or the corporation or even the trap she set. It was teaching me that I was worth protecting, that I deserved better than people who saw me as a dollar sign." Marcus squeezed my hand. "And now you're teaching that to our daughters," the legacy continues. Yes, I agreed. But I'm also teaching them something my grandmother didn't get to teach me. What's that? That there are good people in the world. People like you. People who love authentically. People who build up instead of tear down. My grandmother protected me from the wolves. But you taught me that not everyone is a wolf. Some people are exactly who they appear to be. Good, honest, and true. Marcus kissed my forehead. Your grandmother would be so proud of you, Simone. Not because of the empire you're running, but because of the woman you've become, the mother you are, the legacy you're building. I looked out over Baltimore, the city lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, families were rebuilding their lives with help from the Harriet Washington Foundation. Somewhere out there, young people were learning and growing at the Harriet Washington Community Center. And right here, in my home, my daughters were sleeping peacefully, protected not just by wealth but by wisdom, not just by money but by values. My grandmother had given me an empire, but I had turned that empire into a force for good. That was the real inheritance. That was the true legacy. 15 years after my grandmother's death, I was invited to speak at Harvard Business School. The auditorium was packed with students, all eager to learn about building and managing a successful corporation. I stood at the podium, looking out at their young, hopeful faces. Most people, I began, think the key to success in business is intelligence or connections or luck, and those things matter. But let me tell you about the real key to success, knowing your worth. I told them my story, the whole story, my grandmother's wisdom, the trap she set, Darius's betrayal, the trial, the rebuilding, the foundation, the community center, the real love I found with Marcus, the legacy I'm building for my daughters. When I finished, the auditorium was silent. Then, slowly, one person started clapping, then another. Then the entire room erupted in a standing ovation. After the speech, a young woman approached me. She was black, probably 22, and looked like she was carrying the weight of the world. Miss Washington, thank you for your story. I'm dealing with something similar. My boyfriend keeps pressuring me to give him access to my savings account. He says if I really loved him, I'd trust him. But something feels wrong. I looked at her directly. What's your name? Jasmine, she said. Jasmine, listen to me carefully. Your instincts are right. Real love never demands access to your resources as proof. Real love builds together over time, with trust earned through actions, not demanded through manipulation. Protect yourself. And if he can't accept that, then he's not the right person for you. Her eyes filled with tears. Thank you. I needed to hear that. You're worth protecting, Jasmine. Never forget that. As I watched her walk away, I thought about all the young women who needed to hear that message. That night, I made a decision. I launched the Worth Protecting Initiative, a program specifically designed to teach young women about financial literacy, recognizing manipulation, and protecting their assets and their hearts. We partnered with universities, community centers, and women's organizations across the country. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of young women enrolled. They learned about trusts, prenuptial agreements, red flags in relationships, and most importantly, their inherent worth. 3 years later, I received a letter from Jasmine, the young woman from Harvard. She had broken up with that boyfriend, finished her MBA, and started her own company. Miss Washington, her letter read, you saved my life that day. Not just my money, but my life. Because you taught me that I was worth protecting, I built the courage to leave that toxic relationship. Now I'm building something I'm proud of, on my own terms. Thank you for showing me that success isn't just about building an empire. It's about building a life worth living. I framed that letter and hung it in my office, right next to a photo of my grandmother. On the 20th anniversary of my grandmother's death, Montgomery Legacy Corporation was valued at $500 million. We had expanded into real estate, technology, and media, all while maintaining our commitment to community investment and ethical business practices. The Harriet Washington Foundation had helped over 10,000 families. The community centers had expanded to 12 cities. Marcus's book, Invisible Empires, The Untold Story of Black Entrepreneurs in America, had become a bestseller, and was being adapted into a documentary series. Our daughters, now 15, were brilliant, confident young women who volunteered at our community centers and already talked about continuing the family legacy in their own unique ways. That evening, our entire family gathered at the original Harriet Washington Community Center for a memorial ceremony. I stood at the podium where I had stood so many times before, looking out at hundreds of faces of people whose lives had been transformed by my grandmother's wisdom and the empire built on her foundation. 20 years ago, my grandmother, Harriet Washington, passed away. She left me more than money. She left me wisdom, protection, and a challenge. The challenge was this: would I use what she built to enrich myself or to enrich others? I chose others, and in doing so, I found something more valuable than any amount of money. I found purpose. I found community. I found authentic love. I found myself. I looked at Marcus and our daughters sitting in the front row. My grandmother protected me with her trap, but she also freed me with her wisdom. She taught me that the people who truly matter will love you for who you are, not what you have. To every young person here tonight, I want you to know, you are worth protecting. Your dreams are worth pursuing. Your boundaries are worth defending. And you never, ever have to compromise who you are for anyone else's greed or comfort. The applause was deafening. After the ceremony, I stood alone in my grandmother's memorial garden at the center, surrounded by flowers and peace. I felt her presence there, stronger than ever. "I did it, Grandma," I whispered. "I protected what you built. I honored your legacy, and I built something even bigger, something that helps people, something that would make you proud." The wind rustled through the trees, and I swear I heard her voice. "I always knew you would, baby girl. I always knew." I stood there for a long time, grateful for everything. The pain that made me stronger, the betrayal that led me to truth, the trap that set me free, and most of all, the grandmother who loved me enough to protect me, even from beyond the grave. The most powerful lesson from Simone's journey is that true wealth isn't about what you accumulate, but who you become. Simone's grandmother didn't just leave her money. She left her wisdom, protection, and a mirror that reflected people's true intentions. By pretending to be less than she was, Simone attracted exactly what her grandmother warned against: people who loved wealth, not character. But the trap didn't just protect her money. It revealed the truth she needed to see, allowing her to build a life and legacy based on authentic values rather than false relationships. In the end, Simone's greatest inheritance wasn't the $75 million corporation or the protection clause. It was the wisdom to know her worth, the courage to defend it, and the grace to transform betrayal into purpose. Her grandmother's legacy lives on not just in the empire she built, but in the thousands of lives touched by her wisdom. If this story of protection, betrayal, and ultimate triumph resonated with you, hit like and subscribe for more stories about discovering your true worth and building a legacy that matters.